Sarah's apartment was a peaceful refuge from the busy city. It was a modest one-bedroom space, but she considered it her home, where she could escape the chaos of everyday life. However, in recent weeks, something strange started to happen. It was an ordinary night when Sara returned home after a long day of classes at the university. She was exhausted but eager to relax in her cozy apartment. Upon entering, she noticed that everything seemed normal. The room was tidy, and the soft light from the lamps created a welcoming atmosphere. Sara decided to take a hot bath to relax before curling up in bed with a book. As the water ran, she felt a slight sense of discomfort, as if something was wrong. She looked around the bathroom but didn't see anything out of place. While soaping herself, Sara began to hear a strange sound. There were whispers, almost inaudible, that seemed to come from the dark shadows of the bathroom. She stopped moving and lay completely still, trying to identify the source of the sounds. The whispers became more audible, although still unintelligible. It sounded like several voices were whispering at the same time, as if they were having a distant conversation. Sara turned off the shower and cautiously walked out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around her. The room was dark when she entered, and a feeling of oppression enveloped her. She was sure she had left the light on. Sara trembled as she went into the living room and turned on the lights. The apartment was empty, but the whispers persisted. She tried to convince herself that she was imagining things, that the stress of college life was starting to affect her sanity. She returned to the bathroom, finished getting dressed, and tried to continue her routine as if nothing had happened. However, the whispers did not stop. As she lay in bed trying to concentrate on her book, they came back, louder and more unsettled. They seemed to come from all directions, as if the walls of the apartment were whispering dark secrets. Sara's mind was in turmoil. She tried to find a logical explanation for what was happening, but nothing made sense. She didn't have neighbors close enough for her whispers to be audible, and her apartment was locked. It was then that Sara heard shuffling footsteps coming from the hallway. The sound made her freeze in terror. She knew she was alone in the house, but the footsteps continued, getting closer and closer. With her heart racing, Sara jumped out of bed and, shaking with fear, opened the bedroom door. The light in the hallway was off, and an icy feeling enveloped her. She forced herself to turn on the light, but the footsteps stopped. The hallway was empty, but fear consumed her. She was convinced that something was terribly wrong in her apartment. After the scary night she had, Sara decided that she needed to find an explanation for the disturbing events that were happening in her apartment. She refused to believe she was being haunted, but she couldn't ignore the inexplicable events. The next morning, Sara did a thorough search of her apartment. She checked all the windows and doors, making sure everything was properly locked. There was no sign of forced entry. The apartment felt safe, but fear still haunted her. As the days passed, the incidents continued. Sometimes the whispers were just distant murmurs, but other times they sounded as if they were whispering directly into her ear. Sara felt constantly watched, as if something invisible was lurking around every corner of her home. She began to have recurring nightmares in which she was haunted by sinister shadows that whispered in her ear, their voices filled with rage and despair. She would wake up in the middle of the night, with her heart racing and a feeling of deep terror. Sara spent most of her nights in a state of alert, with all the lights on. She was gradually losing sleep and sanity. The stress was affecting her daily life, harming her academic performance and mental health. In a desperate attempt to understand what was happening, Sara began researching the history of her apartment. She discovered that the building was relatively old and had housed many families over the years. However, there were no records of previous paranormal incidents at the site. Determined to find answers, Sara sought help from a local medium. She hoped that someone with psychic abilities could shed light on the mysterious events in her apartment. The medium visited the apartment and carried out a detailed investigation. He claimed to feel a residual presence in the place, a negative energy that was linked to the building's past. The medium also claimed to have heard the whispers and to have felt the shadowy presence that haunted. He explained to Sara that often trapped spirits or energies can be triggered by traumatic events or intense emotions. He advised Sara to look for a solution to calm the energy in the place. Sara was determined to do whatever it took to regain her peace. She began researching cleansing and protective rituals, looking for a way to calm the disturbed energy in her apartment. She knew that to solve this mystery, she would have to confront the unknown directly. Thus, Sara began her journey towards confronting the unexplainable, hoping to finally dispel the shadows that hung over her home and discover the truth behind the terrifying events in her apartment. Sara dove headfirst into her search for a solution to the terrifying events haunting her apartment. She was determined to end the fear that had crept into her life. After weeks of research and conversations with experts, she finally found a ritual that could calm the disturbed energy. The ritual required burning sacred herbs and reciting words of protection in each room of the apartment. It was an attempt to purify the space and ward off any negative energy or evil entities that might be present. Sara meticulously prepared for the ritual. She acquired the necessary herbs, a ceramic bowl, and white candles. She studied the words she would have to recite and practiced until she felt she could perform it with confidence. It was a full moon night when Sara was finally ready to perform the ritual. She turned off all the lights in the apartment except for a white candle that she placed in the center of the living room. She held the ceramic bowl filled with lit herbs and began to walk through each room of the apartment. As she recited the words of protection, a sense of calm began to spread over her. She felt like she was on the right path, that she was regaining control over her space and her life. As the scent of herbs filled the air, the whispers that tormented her began to fade, as if they were being driven away by the power of the ritual. Sara arrived in the room, where the paranormal events were most intense. While performing the ritual there, she felt a dark, hostile presence around her. The whispers intensified momentarily, as if they were struggling to maintain themselves. Determined not to back down, Sara continued reciting the words of protection firmly. She saw shadows dancing on the walls, but she refused to give in to fear. Finally, the feeling of hostility began to dissipate, and the room became calm. Sara returned to the living room and completed the ritual. The white candle burned brightly, like a beacon of hope in the midst of darkness. When she finished, the feeling of peace and relief washed over her. It was as if the apartment was finally free of the negative energy that had haunted it. She knew the cleaning process might not have solved all the problems, but it was a step in the right direction. Sara was determined to regain her space and tranquility, whatever the cost. The following night, Sara noticed a drastic change in her apartment. There were no more disturbing whispers, and the feeling of oppression had completely disappeared. She was able to sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, and her nightmares were gone. As the days passed, Sara's life returned to normal. She regained focus on her studies and began to rebuild her routine. She felt stronger and more confident, knowing that she had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. However, Sara was not completely convinced that the events were over. She knew she would have to remain vigilant, prepared to face any challenge the paranormal world could present. After all, the mystery behind the inexplicable events in her apartment was yet to be completely unraveled. It has been months since Sara performed the cleaning ritual in her apartment. During this time, she was able to regain a sense of normalcy and peace. The paranormal events that haunted her seemed to have been pushed aside, and she began to believe that it had all been just a dark chapter in her life. However, one rainy autumn night, as Sara was getting ready for bed, she heard a faint sound coming from the bedroom closet. It was like a whisper, almost imperceptible, but enough to awaken her fear. She approached the closet slowly and, with her heart racing, opened the door. To her surprise, there was nothing inside the closet that could produce the sound, but the whisper persisted, and Sara realized it was coming from behind the closet wall. She knocked on the wall and, to her surprise, heard a hollow sound. Determined to solve the mystery once and for all, Sara began moving furniture from the room and finally discovered a secret door behind the closet. Carefully, she opened it and entered a dark, dusty space. The space was narrow and appeared to lead to an abandoned basement that was not listed in the building's plan. Sara used a flashlight to light the way and went down the narrow stairs. She knew she was entering unknown territory, but her curiosity and determination drove her forward. When she arrived at the basement, Sara was shocked by what she saw. The place was full of antiques, old furniture, and old photographs. There was also a strange altar with burning candles and mysterious objects arranged in a ritualistic manner. As she explored the basement, Sara found a dusty diary full of old notes. As she read the yellowing pages, she discovered the dark history of a family who had lived in that apartment decades ago. They were involved in dark, occult practices, performing rituals that invoked dark entities. Sara was shocked to discover that the family had lost a young daughter under mysterious circumstances. They believed that their daughter had been possessed by an evil entity that had been summoned by their own rituals. The diary detailed the family's desperate efforts to deal with the evil presence and protect their daughter. As Sara continued to read, she realized that the family had sealed the basement and tried to forget the dark past that haunted it. However, the negative energy left behind by rituals and tragedy had never truly been dispelled. Sara realized she was dealing with an evil presence that was tied to the building's history. She was determined to undo the harm that had been done decades ago. She returned to the basement and began to perform a purification ritual, burning sacred herbs and reciting words of protection. As the ritual progressed, Sara felt a desperate struggle from the dark energy surrounding her. She knew she was facing a powerful entity, but her determination was unshakable. She did not rest until she felt that the evil presence was weakened and that the apartment was finally free from the influence of the occult practices of the past. As the cellar filled with the aroma of burning herbs, Sara knew she had triumphed. She closed the secret door and sealed it, leaving behind the dark past that had tormented her. Sara learned that sometimes the most terrifying mysteries can have deep roots in the past, and that facing the unknown with courage and determination can lead to resolution. With her apartment finally free of the shadows of the past, she was ready to move on with her life, knowing she was stronger than ever. The dark story that had haunted her apartment had finally come to an end.